Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff J. Brown in Shenzhen, China, for another China Rising Radio Sound Land podcast and article. This one is really laden with lots and lots of visuals and bunches of hyperlinks. So if you can get the article in front of you and listen and read while I do the podcast, it would be really much more meaningful. So let me take a sip of my green tea here. You know, if you have cancer, drink green tea. Don't want cancer, drink green tea. Want to get pregnant? Drink green tea. Don't want to get pregnant? Drink green tea. Chinese green tea. I tell you, it is the cure-all for everything. All right. Today's title is BRICS, as in B-R-I-C-S. BRICS is Euranglo-land's canary in the imperial coal mines. And there is a logo of the BRICS Summit that just took place in China, and with a tongue-in-cheek byline. Above the official logo of the big BRICS Summit held in Xiamen, China, September 3rd to the 5th, 2017. It was reported that there were dead canaries all over the place, covered in coal dust. No official explanation has been provided, but Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese homologue, Xi Jinping, were reported to be smiling from start to finish. All right, let's get serious. Here's the actual article. It was not so long ago that the world's headlines were different, very different. During the Cold War, 1945 to 1990, Washington orchestrated much of the world's media with an iron fist. The propaganda was symphonic and pedantic. Then there were the communist and socialist countries, principally China and the USSR, who had their sphere of influence at home and mostly in poor, underdeveloped parts of the world. But to be honest, the latter group was like a red flea on a capitalist bull elephant's rump. It was no contest. Since the 1980s, the situation in Euranglo-land, and that is, of course, NATO and Australia and New Zealand thrown in for good measure, Euranglo-land has only gotten much worse. The Internet was supposed to be humanity's great liberator for truth and justice. The West's owners made sure that that was never going to happen in the mainstream media, which is all that is needed to brainwash the masses behind the Great Western Firewall. The CIA MI6 military complex has tens of billions of off-book dollars and euros to spend on big lie propaganda. Where does it get this ill-gotten loot? By running the world's heroin and cocaine trade. Now you know why the United States will never leave Afghanistan. Before Uncle Sam illegally invaded and occupied that country in 2001, its annual opium production was only 600 metric tons per year, which satisfies global needs to manufacture painkillers, anesthetics, etc. How much is Euranglo-land hauling out now to turn into heroin for its own citizens back home? Between 6,000 and 7,000 metric tons per year. Ditto all the American military planes flying in tons of Latin American cocaine to the United States. They don't call the CIA the Cocaine Importing Agency for nothing. It is a massive taxpayer-subsidized, organized criminal empire and a windfall for big Western banks to launder all those billions in drug money, not to mention the ever-expanding U.S. prison industry, which continues to harvest millions of poor and dark-skinned citizens like so much as caged chickens to be plucked. The whole simulacrum of, quote, Western democracy, end of quote, is rotten to the core as truckloads of drug money are used to bribe the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, high and low. There's a graph showing logarithmic prison population growth in the United States starting in the 1980s, and the byline says, America's multi-billion-dollar prison industrial complex is a direct beneficiary of the West's global drug empire. The number of prisoners is like dividends paid on stock shares. Business is good, brother, really good. It is not until you bitterly and humbly recognize the West for what it is a, quote, legal, end of quote, global mafia, that the way the world works finally starts to make sense. It hurts to admit it, but it is the manifest truth. Then there is all that dirty lucre for the mainstream media. Jeff Bezos of Amazon knows a government-subsidized gravy train when he sees one, and was happy to buy the Washington Post for $250 million. Due diligence? Are you shitting me? No need to bother in the mainstream media. Remember only a few years ago how Western newspapers weren't going to survive the internet age? The flagship ones are doing fine, thanks to laundered drug money pouring in exchange for the CIA MI6 military boys to churn out imperial propaganda in print and mostly free content online. Not to mention making sure there is no serious investigative journalism exposing the West's true face and psychopathic ego, Mr. Hyde. So the relentless fascist Western propaganda machine is only getting more terrifying, but the old, limited communist and socialist propaganda system has been replaced by something that is giving Euranglo-land nightmares. All those historically anti-colonial countries have morphed into a number of global organizations that are taking full advantage of what Internet can do for, quote, public relations, end of quote, which was Edward Bernays' euphemism for propaganda. There are historical ones that continue to make a difference. Think of the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM, the Organization of African Unity, OAU. Later came the Bolivarian Alternative for Latin America, and the Caribbean, abbreviated ALBA, ALBA, and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, abbreviated CELAC, CELAC. They have had their success stories in fighting the good fight against the dictatorship of Western imperialism, exploitation, wars, and false flags. I wrote about each one in my book, China Rising, Capitalist Roads, Socialist Destinations. But like the old generation communist and socialist countries, their impact has been mostly inspirational, not transformative, in knocking Euranglo-land's capitalist juggernaut on its butt. However, in the last 10 to 15 years, we have seen amazing alliances forged together. Big bad motherfuckers. The, quote, knock Uncle Sam on his ass kind. With the moxie, military, and economic power to give Washington, London, and Paris more than they ever bargained for. Why? 3 reasons. First, after 500 years of global tyranny, Western empire is going through its natural and predictable decline and eventual fall. This has happened to every complex society since the beginning of sedentary civilization 8 to 10,000 years ago, which is explained very well in 2 complementary books, The Collapse of Complex Societies and Collapse, How Societies Choose to Fail. I synthesized their 2 theories in writing about China's 6 collapses in China is Communist, Damn It, Dawn of the Red Dynasty. Second, as the West slowly loses its dictatorial grip on planet Earth, its former colonies and ideological foes are filling the vacuum by growing exponentially in financial, economic, and military spheres. Do Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa come to mind? While barely acknowledged in the West as a group, you should know them under the acronym BRICS, B-R-I-C-S. This alliance started slowly in 2009 with great promise, meeting frequently, followed by non-stop multi-party consultations. Third, this and other multipolar alliances discussed below are giving Western empire complete fits since it has never been able to compete on a level playing field. Western countries thrive on parasiting and enslaving smaller, weaker countries that cannot fight back and defend their international rights and dignity. Euranglo-land has never been put in a situation of having to compete mano a mano with rich, technologically and militarily advanced countries, in parentheses, the USSR lacked the rich element, end of parentheses. And BRICS and company together have all of this in spades. There's a BRICS logo and of the flags of the 5 countries and the byline says, "No Euranglo-land, red, white, and blue, nor blue and gold to be found here." Going on, in 2015, BRICS created an International Monetary Fund, IMF, competitor by establishing an emergency loan fund with a whopping $100 billion kitty, which is not exactly chump change. Then, to compete against the West's World Bank, WB, BRICS created its own new development bank, abbreviated NDB. It too has deep pockets rivaling the World Bank with $100 billion in capital. The BRICS alliance could not be more timely, as China and Russia are promoting like dervishes their complementary Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, and Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU, respectively. They are slowly melding into each other's orbits, creating a hands-off Uncle Sam trade and cooperation zone anchored in the heartlands of Asia, while stretching from Africa to Europe to Latin America and Oceania. Then there's a map of the BRICS vision, and it says China's BRI is estimated to be adding $1 trillion per year in global economic activity and will continue to do so for another 20 years. Then there is a map of the EUAU, and it said Russia's EUAU is just as impressive and a perfect hand-in-glove with China's BRI. Vietnam is already a member in its free trade zone. Huge Indonesia is also working towards that goal. The countries in sky blue are in discussion to join the party. Similar are Russia's and China's Asian security organizations, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, the CSTO, and Shanghai Security Organization, a cooperation organization, respectively. Put their two maps together and it spells, Euranglo-land, get lost! A huge step in Asian integration happened recently with the ascension of India and Pakistan to the SCO, historically bitter enemies. Iran cannot be far behind. Then there's a map of the CSTO and the SCO, and the byline says the CSTO and the SCO below, together they more than match Euranglo-land's outdated and ill-existing NATO. The dark blue countries are observers in SCO, purple are dialogue partners, and turquoise dialogue applicants. Lime green are supposedly disputed territories, according to the West. These four organizations, with the BRI being more of a long-term developmental vision than an edifice, are not window dressing, but a collective colossus that is active, dynamic, communicating, and co-sharing ideas, information, and concrete development. In the years to come, they will harmonize and synthesize into a massive power block to keep the predatory imperial West out of Asia. What is most encouraging about all this are three recent developments which show the tremendous resilience of these alliances. First was the illegal and Western-backed deposition of former Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff. She was replaced by a Wall Street hack and vulture step-and-fetch-it, Michel Temer. His criminality and greed make Western leaders look like saints, which is hard to do. Not only did it give Brazil a humiliating black eye around the world, many people were saying BRICS was doomed since there was now a slash-and-burn capitalist crook running one of the world's biggest countries and economies. But it didn't turn out that way. Temer came to the latest BRICS Summit, which just happened in Xiamen, China. Eyeing that $200 billion in the BRICS banks probably didn't hurt. It also suggests that a BRICS administrative hierarchy is already in place in the halls of government, and Brazil's capitalist owners want it for their own enrichment. Business is business. Second was the recent border skirmish that has been vexing India and China just days after India joined the SCO. There is lots of speculation that pro-Western anti-SCO elements in the Indian military instigated it in hopes of getting the Chinese to attack, to then justify pulling back out of the SCO. But for 2 months, Baba Beijing was cool like Zen, man. As in the U.S., India has a very corrupt and dysfunctional Western democracy, which includes the army not really being under the full control of the commander-in-chief. So Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping got on the phone and got it resolved right before the BRICS Summit this week. Both sides claim victory for domestic consumption, and it is now back to affairs as usual. Again, business is business, and the vast majority of BRICS citizens love its peaceful, hopeful vision and infrastructure development. Third, right as the BRICS Summit was supposed to begin, DPRK, also known as North Korea, set off an underground hydrogen bomb and announced that it now had an ICBM to send it as far as the USA. Western media, mainstream media, tried to portray it as a, quote, slap in the face of Xi Jinping, end of quote, by DPRK leader Kim Jong-un. On the contrary, I suspect the detonation was planned at that time by Russia and China so that the BRICS Summit would have to deal with it, and that is exactly what happened. Putin and Xi announced that they were going to take care of it, and thus BRICS took ownership of the issue, further isolating America. As a result, the Russians are now working with the North and South Koreans to meet next month in St. Petersburg, which is the last thing Uncle Sam wants, any détente across the 38th parallel that would threaten the U.S.'s raison d'etre to keep 30,000 troops and occupy 9 military bases in the South, which house undeclared nuclear warheads. To pave the way for this meeting to happen, Korean President Moon Jae-in just met yesterday with Mr. Putin at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russia, which followed right on the heels of the Xiamen BRICS Summit. While America threatens war on China's and Russia's borders, these latter leaders are seeking peaceful resolution. The irony that America's act would also vaporize its poodle ally, South Korea, cannot be lost on the latter's 50 million occupied citizens. It's called racism, pure and simple. Thus, the resilience of BRICS when the chips are down and its huge boost in profile and effectiveness on the world stage are truly a canary in Urangloland's imperial coal mines. It is just one more barometer, a geopolitical indicator that Western empire is thankfully losing its dictatorial grip on the planet and slowly collapsing into irrelevance. Humanity would perish with another 500 years of capitalist wars, resource destruction, and genocide. I'm not even sure we can make it another 10 to 20 years. So, get out your pom-poms and cheer with me. Give me a B! B. Give me an R! R. Give me an I! I. Give me a C! C. Give me an S! S. What's that spell? BRICS! Go, BRICS, go! That's all today from Jeff Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland in Shenzhen. Have a wonderful day.